Iranian state media has officially confirmed that Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, Iran's highest authority since 1989, is dead. The 86-year-old Supreme Leader was killed in a joint US-Israeli military strike on Tehran on Sunday, 28th of February of this year, 2026. He was killed alongside his daughter, son-in-law, and granddaughter. A 40-day national mourning period and 7 days of public holidays have been declared in Iran. We will break down the historic happenings of the past 24 hours. But first, let's take a moment to look at how his death was tearfully announced by Iranian state media.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. من المؤمنين رجال صدقوا ما عاهدوا الله عليه فمنهم من قضى نحبه ومنهم من ينتظر وما بدلوا تبديلا إنا لله.
Well, those emotional words were in Farsi, but the tears and the pain heard can be understood despite any language barrier. But in English, another Iranian state broadcaster had these extremely stern words of warning for the US President Donald Trump and his allies. Let's take a listen to that.
This is not over. Trump is going to pay a price paid by no American president at all time, paid by no Zionist of all time, paid by no criminal of all time. Trump is going to see, because revenge is coming, and revenge is coming soon, and revenge is coming after Trump, after everybody who facilitated this assassination. He will pay the ultimate price.
So very, very stern words there. Now, US President Trump himself did call on Iranian security forces to lay down their weapons and invited Iranians to topple their government once the bombing ended. Now, Iran, for its part, has called the strikes unprovoked and illegal and has retaliated. It's launched missiles towards Israel and also towards Gulf states hosting US assets, including Qatar, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, with several governments saying that they had intercepted incoming missiles. Jordan also reported interceptions. Now, this explosion you're seeing on your screen was seen in the Qatari capital of Doha. Now, the General Civil Aviation Authority has also announced a temporary partial closure of United Arab Emirates airspace. The exceptional precautionary measure has been taken to ensure the safety of flights, passengers, and air crews across the country. But it also has unleashed travel chaos across the region. Now, you can see the crowds of passengers. This is at Dubai International Airport. Now, Etihad, which services Abu Dhabi, says that all flights to and from Abu Dhabi are suspended until 2 a.m. local time on Monday. Israel was also struck by Iranian missiles landing in Tel Aviv. Now, air raid sirens could be heard as Israel launched interceptors against incoming missiles. This is significant because it expands the battlefield beyond just Israel and Iran. Clearly, what we've seen across the Middle East, across the Gulf region, is chaos. And clearly, states that typically work hard to avoid direct conflict are now having to raise the risk of a sustained regional escalation, even if these countries do not enter the war politically. A huge mess. Now, coming over to the United States, in New York, the United Nations Security Council did gather with the United States and Israel, clashing with Iran, as you can imagine, at that emergency meeting of the UN Security Council, where the UN Chief Antonio Guterres and many countries urged a halt to their attacks and a return to negotiations to prevent the conflict from spreading further into the region and beyond. beyond. Now, Secretary General Antonio Guterres did tell the Council that everything must be done to prevent an escalation. Clearly, we can see that hasn't happened yet. Now, the world continues to be on standby. The potential blockade of the Hormuz threatens nearly 20% of global oil shipments alongside significant LNG exports, particularly from Qatar. Now, oil and energy markets have already reacted. We've seen prices jump on the news of conflict and threats to the route. Now, if traffic is fully blocked, even if only for a few days, analysts are warning that oil prices could spike dramatically. Now, potentially they could double depending on how long the closure lasts for. And as for Iran, it is now facing a vacuum, a leadership vacuum after Khamenei's death. I did hear you discuss the people who would be leading in the interim, but under the Iranian constitution, interim control shifts to a council made up of the president, judiciary chief, and a guardian council member essentially they will all be together until a new supreme leader is chosen by the assembly of experts. Now, we can expect a period of continued uncertainty. However, Mr. Steve, this was literally history happening right before our eyes. Absolutely. We know that over the course of the week and before then in Geneva, that was the host of negotiations between Iran, between the United States, brokered by Oman. Oman known to be a friend to everybody in the region and beyond. And when we did hear news break around Thursday to Friday that those negotiations had ended without any concrete peace resolution, perhaps people may have thought that escalation could be on the card, but the escalation of this magnitude, I do think, caught a lot of people by surprise. So this is the reality that we have. The supreme leader has been killed. It is confirmed. You know, when the news did break late last evening, there was some back and forth. Iran at first had denied that he had been killed, said that he was still directing forces until finally they did admit that he had been killed, that his body had been recovered from the rubble. Wow. Here we stand with literally history on our fingertips. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Absolutely. I mean, a different brilliant, analysis to start with. Yesterday when it broke, we discussed this matter, fairly extensively, yesterday, and nobody knew, that where we'll be is that on the first day, of that conflict, the 86-year-old Khamenei, will be taken out, so soon, and in such a dramatic, manner. Isn't it interesting, therefore, that after all the attempts towards what looks like negotiation, like peace, Trump has always spoken about peace. Here we have, ended up with. It looked like, just like you rightly observed, it looked like it was Israel, that was leading the pack. Yes. And then almost all of a sudden, it became a joint thing. And so to me, this is like, clearly an end, of an era to Khamenei. But then it also looks like the beginning of a major conflict, for which we may not know at what point it will stop, not just for Iran, but also for Middle East, in region, the Gulf states, given the way that Iran has responded, and not just to attack formations, American formations in several Gulf states, but, touching on residential places, touching on hotels, in UAE, in Bahrain, in Qatar, and a situation looks so dire, at this point. And then Trump is saying, this must end up in a regime change. And you have broken down, what it takes for a successor to be appointed. The one that intrigues me more is the jubilation that we have seen. Yes. Not only in Tehran.
People are very happy. People are happy.
All over the places in London and everywhere. But then we also see, from what the broadcaster, the woman broadcaster that we had there, saying that, this will be costly and that the price might be paid. Who therefore can lead Iran, after this, and what is the future of the region after all this will have ended, if it doesn't get to what people fear, which will be the beginning of World War III. We hope, of course, and pray that it doesn't get to that point. Yeah. But who knows what can happen?
And, this regime change is also quite a scary topic to discuss, because how many successful regime changes brings in an Ayatollah that is not so bloodthirsty and violent.
Exactly.
The first one was terrible. It seems like the second one, everyone is rejoicing that he's gone. Who is going to fill that vacuum? And really, what can be done to prevent this escalation from spilling over? We've seen the knee-jerk reaction from Iran and, of course, bombing different places that don't necessarily have anything to do with the conflict. So we just hope that everything can be contained.
Definitely. It is very tough.
It's very tough right now.
Absolutely. But Adefemi, there's also a point that I would like to quickly add. Trump seemed to have won the American people that there might be casualties.
Yeah.
You know, which is an indication that this might be a long drawn thing.
Yes.
But then there doesn't seem to be there's no congressional approval, so to speak.
Right.
And
they're very upset about that.
As to going into this sort of a war.
This is it.
Do you think that there will be another battle that Trump will have to face back home while the war is raging?
This is the thing. It is likely that there are going to be political consequences for Donald Trump. And it is tough because he clearly has shown that his own definition of presidency is supreme power above everybody else. Do it first and then deal with the consequences later. So this is just another example of that. What is very interesting is that when we're looking at US President Donald Trump and his foreign policy, it almost feels as though he's talking out of both sides of his mouth. On the one hand, he talks about how he is putting out all of these geopolitical fires. He's pushing for peace. He's ending wars. And then on the other hand, you see him going into other countries, taking a president, taking them into the United States, putting them on trial.
That was Maduro.
Maduro in Venezuela.
Yeah.
Let's not forget what he did here in Nigeria.
Absolutely. Christmas Day, dropping bombings. Even though the narrative is that this was in connection with the Nigerian government,
The narrative was that America was invited and is now speaking glowingly about our first lady.
Absolutely. But America, surely we're not invited into Iran. Surely not. So what we're seeing here is it is very difficult to really be able to predict what happens next when it comes to US focused